Right. These days, it looks like every time I interview somebody, they have multiple personalities. And my guest today is not different. And from her description, she says she's a writer, a photographer, a traveler, a Beatles expert, a bad poet, a believer, a human rights advocate. And all of those awesome things are bundled in one, the great personality of Kate Siobhan Mulligan. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me this morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a nice cloudy day here in Vancouver once again.
So you're in Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah, born and raised, still call it home for as long as I can.
Great. And you do a lot of travel, so, right?
I do. I get to travel a lot for work. I think above all those descriptions you mentioned, really, I'm a freelancer. And so part of making that work these days, in today's world, means taking on lots of different projects and really expanding out your skills. So it appears I do a ton, and maybe, in fact, I do, or at least they're very different. But I'm pulling it all together lets me have this really interesting lifestyle that I've grown quite addicted to.
So you're currently working as the operations manager for the Giving Lens.
That's correct. I've been with Giving Lens since the very start.
So I know a bit about the Giving Lens. I think it's a great initiative. Would you like to tell us a bit about it?
I'd love to. I can talk about the Giving Lens all day. It's what we're doing is we're running travel photography workshops where we also partner with a local nonprofit. And so part of the trip, they're generally 7 to 10 days. 2 to 3 days will be documenting the nonprofit's work, as well as teaching photography to an appropriate community, often kids or schools, but also we've done women and young adults or the staff of the NGO. The reason it's important or that it's working to us is one, we can provide great visual aids to those NGOs, which in this day and age is really, really important, especially as photographers, but even just society in general is so visually driven, and great causes can go completely unnoticed because they have no compelling imagery. So that's one way we can really help. Two, photography as a teaching aid, it's very creatively freeing, it's very therapeutic for the community. It's really cheap to get, old point and shoots. There's no film involved anymore. And so it's cheap for the nonprofit to maintain, and it really can be inspiring and invoke values of self-worth and self-confidence and originality into otherwise kind of underprivileged communities. And then our teams get the chance to practice documentary and humanitarian skills all around that, along with the rest of the trip looking like a normal travel photography workshop.
So these are some photos that you took during your activities with the Giving Lens, and so people can join. It works like a photography workshop, and they get to take photos in those places and get an education, but they also get to contribute somehow to helping those communities.
Yeah, we like to think everyone that comes leaves an impact and then goes home really impacted. It's absolutely a two-way street. And so we've been to Peru, Nicaragua, Cambodia, Tanzania, Jordan, all over, and we are adding new trips every year at kind of a slow and steady pace. Thailand, that's this one, and you can see these kids, the point and shoots are basic, but there's just such a joy in it because it's instant, and most of us are used to instant things, but a lot of these communities don't get the privilege of something so instantly gratifying. And you can send 20 kids out with cameras and get 20 very different photos back, and they can be really proud of this fact that they are different from their friends, which leads to a lot of interesting questions, like they can make different and better choices for their lives. They could choose to stay in school. They can choose to, break out of whatever cycles they're stuck in. It's not about training up the next photographers, like in this image in Peru, it's just about instilling some really crucial self-worth, self-value, and for the nonprofit, like I said, it's cheap to maintain. The trips do look like normal travel photography workshops otherwise. There's always 2 photographers on the team. Like for Peru, we also spent 2 days at Machu Picchu. That team actually just came home yesterday or wrapped up. But one of the biggest things we do aside from sharing imagery is that we share the profits with the team, which would normally go to the company that organized it or whatever, and that's completely fine. Travel photography workshops are a wonderful thing. For our purposes, what we're doing is sharing those profits with the NGO, along with the images and the donated cameras. And we only have 1 partner per country. So Thailand, we've been back to twice. Peru, we just sent our 4th team. Nicaragua, for this picture, we're about to send our 5th team. And so we can really build on what we've started. And that, I think, makes a longer term, bigger impact than just these one-off visits. We really build a relationship and some solidarity with the nonprofit as well.
That's really great. One thing I was noticing in those photos is that you see a lot of very different camera brands and models. I'm curious, how do you get those cameras? Do you get donations from people, from companies, camera manufacturer that
no companies? No, we have our team members just recruit cameras from their neighbors and friends and social media. We make little flyers that they can share online digitally. And if everyone on the trip collects, 1 to 5 cameras, we have more than enough. And we just ask, that the LCD screen is working, because that's a big part of it for these communities. And that it charges, it comes with all the cords. Preferably it comes with a regular SD card. We did get one for Peru one year that I think took a floppy disk, and that posed a lot of issues for how to get those photos onto a more modern computer. But other than that, we just collect that way. It gives our team members something to do pre-trip to get them ready, and everyone has an old camera. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of us, in a drawer somewhere because we've upgraded. And we never really knew what to do with it, so this can be a great way to repurpose those cameras. There's certainly nothing wrong with them. Even the low megapixel ones from years ago for these purposes still go a very long way. And the kids have a ton of fun with them. That said, we are looking to partner up just to get maybe some more bulk donations from camera companies or camera stores, last year's models or whatever. Because of course, the kids, they deserve treats that way. The communities, to get something brand new that can make someone feel extremely special. Not that they keep them, but to use them. Although getting repurposed ones, especially if they're in good shape, is just as valuable to us. And
where do those pictures end up? In the end, do those kids have the schools have computers, or the organizations where they can download their pictures and get them printed?
Yeah. It's definitely trickier. So they will have a few laptops, and we can and do fundraise laptops as well. And we have a very rudimentary but working system for, the cameras are often numbered, and we make sure the same kid uses the same camera each day if we can, to keep them straight. Generally, we'll have them pick a few photos, and we'll keep that they really loved from the workshops. Like in this photo from Tanzania, we're on a scavenger hunt. They can pick a few. It's not so much about the kids keeping all 1,000 pictures they've snapped off in the day, but also that process of going through the camera and picking out your favorite ones. Why are they your favorite? What did you, do differently here? And just supporting them in that. It's mostly just about encouragement. And we'll make sure the nonprofit keeps those few safe. Specifically just in Peru, we did family portraits, and we printed those while we were there and gave them back to the families while we were there, which is always the best way to do it. Post-trip, we partner with SmugMug, and so participants can upload to 3 different folders, to images for the NGO, to images of each other, which is always just a fun byproduct of being on a team trip, and images, just their best overall from the trip. and specifically the NGO folder we share with the nonprofit. They can easily download. We keep the images to a reasonable size so that they can access. We don't try to mail CDs or anything like that. Because that's just not really realistic when you're talking about a country like Tanzania. And then the NGO is free to use them as they please. The files are named after the participant, and so they can be referenced when the NGO uses them. And participants don't have to upload absolutely everything they took by any means, just the ones they feel are the strongest and that they're comfortable potentially being shared or used by the NGO, either on social media or on a pamphlet or on a website.
And for people who would like to join one of those workshops, what are the next destinations that are coming up in case people would like to come?
We have Nicaragua in July, but I'm fairly positive that one is now full. I have one person pending, but I believe that's going to go through, and then it will be full. Tanzania, we still have space for 2 more. That's in the very end of August. Really popular trip, very exciting trip, like pictured here, just ample photographic opportunities and emotional opportunities, and safari certainly is an added bonus. Coming up in the fall, we're going to return to Cambodia. We're trying to pull together a Morocco trip right now, which we've never been to. Jordan, and early 2016, we're looking at some new destinations like Cuba or potentially Australia.
Great.
It's all on the website, which is just thegivingLens.com. There's a way to stay tuned even before they're announced. Make sure you get the first email when the trips are coming up.
Okay, that's really great. I'll absolutely love what you're doing, and giving this humanitarian spin to workshops where sometimes people will go to a country on a travel photography workshop, and I'll be no more than tourists, and here I think they have the opportunity to really make a change, an impact, a positive impact on.
It can be really impactful for everyone involved, and often we have a huge amount of alumni, so we're doing something right. People that sign up for 2nd and 3rd and 4th trips. It does really try to stay away from feeling like a tourist. We really want to focus people on being a traveler, being a better traveler. And while we want people to come back, we want them to leave with the tools that they need to do this on any of their future trips. Travel photography or volunteering or both. And for that reason, I think they've just been so successful.
So I really wanted to introduce our conversation with this topic. I could say opportunistically that sometimes people will drop out of a long video, and I really wanted this one to be at the start to give the most exposure, because I totally think it's totally worth it. But I would like to talk a bit more about you.
Sure.
When did you get started with photography? Has it always been a passion? And has it been your traveling that has driven you to photography, or is it photography that has driven you to traveling?
Good questions. Well, my mom was a hobbyist but very passionate photographer growing up. So we had a dark room, and so I was very familiar and comfortable in this realm. I also was the youngest, and I say the slowest. So I was always stuck sitting for her portraits, for her practice, and so in front of and behind the lens growing up. But for a long time, I didn't realize it was such a huge passion of mine, because I think anything your parents do inherently you find a little boring. And so now if my mom likes photography, it can't be cool. So actually what I pursued first was journalism. I really loved writing. My dad's kind of a journalist type here in Vancouver, Terry David Mulligan, radio and TV. So I think I pulled from that as well. But once I graduated with my degree in creative writing, I realized it was very hard to make money in writing these days. And I found myself more and more pulled back to my camera, which I think a huge catalyst was my wedding. And I realized how important the photos were, like more than the ceremony, more than the food, more than anything else. I cared about getting great photos. I'm a little obsessive. that kind of clued me into the fact that I was actually really passionate, I think at my core, about stories. And writing is a great way to tell stories, but I realized that photography increasingly is such a powerful way to tell a story. And that started with the story of my wedding day and then other weddings that I started photographing. But quickly, the stories of my travels, which came first. I traveled a lot before I even took photos. And as the two came together, I realized the story of a place, the story of its people, the story of a culture. I did a lot of volunteering through Habitat for Humanity, and that was part of how I funded my travels early on. And so then the story of the nonprofit, stories of issues, really people-driven pieces, quickly became very, very passionate to me. I'm around 2010 or 11, I started talking with Colby Brown about the giving lens and what he was trying to do, and I kind of had a Swiss Army knife of skills that were going to fit really well with that. I had the writing, some photography, I had the volunteering experience, I'd led some teams with Habitat for Humanity, so putting a team together. Anyway, it all fit really well. I started doing that while I was still a full-time youth worker in a school, and in 2012 I quit youth work. As much as I honestly loved it, hardest decision I made to pursue freelancing with the giving lens and onwards to other projects I've taken on. It's really just exploded since about 2012.
And what about your choice of equipment? I know that nowadays you are shooting with Sony cameras. Can you tell us a bit about your evolution in terms of equipment?
Absolutely.
And if traveling played a role in that, because many people nowadays who have switched to mirrorless systems, they did it for the weight. They're
Yes,
traveling, and
absolutely.
so it's less weight.
Part of it. I started with Canon. I started with a Canon Rebel, like a T2i, and then a 7D, and then I made the leap to a 5D Mark III once I had shot a couple weddings and saved up all that money. And then I had a second Canon as my backup camera. All of that was a very heavy bag to take on the road. And with travel photography, I do want two cameras because if it died, like at the top of Machu Picchu, I want that spare. I'm not leaving without the photo. There's no way. I actually had my 70 to 200 come out of my bag looking like a slinky at the top of Machu Picchu. So I know that gear is not indestructible when these things happen. I'm not a tall or a particularly strong person. I'm only about 5'5", and I was carrying probably my own body weight in gear. And recently I started to realize maybe there was something happening here with mirrorless to slim down and lighten that load. I think when I first started, I really thought that being new to the industry, being a woman, maybe a little bit just, I wanted to show up with all the biggest and best gear to really kind of prove my place. But I don't feel the need to do that anymore. I just want to get the photo. I moved past that quickly when I realized that's a really silly game to be playing. Sony got on my radar because someone from Sony who just works there, running part of the Western branch, kind of casually put the A6000 in my hands and just said, like, try this, just try it, just for fun. And I did, and I was so impressed with the vividness of the imagery, with the lightweight, with the speed, with some of the functions that Sony had that my Canon absolutely didn't have. Wi-Fi, an electronic viewfinder, things like that, that I immediately sold off my second Canon and bought the A6000. My husband and I went on a 6 or 7 month journey around Europe because I'm freelancing, so we can do fun things like that. And increasingly, I was taking the Sony out with me more and more on a daily basis. I really have separation anxiety from my camera, so downsizing to something like the Sony and a small lens let me bring my camera literally everywhere with me during this trip.
So it was you who convinced Colby to start using Sony, not the other way around.
I convinced Colby of everything. I call myself the Wizard of Oz. I'm just behind Colby, pulling all the strings. Not at all. But certainly watching his evolution with Sony and a number of other photographers also piqued my interest. But I also know people using Fuji and Olympus, so I was pretty open-minded. But I really, the A6000 just did it for me on every level, and the creative freedom I felt going lightweight changed over this 7-month in particular journey, where I realized as much as bringing all the gear is wonderful, if I'm dreading it, I'm not going to be inspired. If I'm in pain in my shoulders and my hips from carrying all that gear, it's really hard to be inspired at the end of that.
So you're, for the time being, you're staying with the A6000, which is a crop sensor camera. And I guess it makes sense not going with the A7 because, well, you would save a bit on maybe on the weight and size of the camera, but then full frame lenses would end up being pretty much the same size as your old Canon.
Yeah, I found the quality first of the A6000 phenomenal, and then the size and the speed of it were just perfect for what I was looking for. Right now, I do have an A7R on loan from Sony, and it's also wonderful. It's not that much bigger. And I'm borrowing some of those full frame lenses, which are really tempting. Specifically, the 55 Zeiss is just got to be one of the best portrait lenses out there, which for what I do is important. Although that does attach to the A6000. So I'm playing with both, and I still have my Canon 5D Mark III, but I won't lie, it's collecting a bit of dust these days. So I'm really kind of rethinking where my work is going and where my journey is going to take me.
As a mirrorless user myself, one of the things that is most disappointing about those systems is battery life. And I think this is probably more an issue for you when you're traveling to Tanzania or another third world country where you can bring 10 batteries, but you cannot charge 10 batteries at a time if you're out in the middle of nowhere and maybe there is no electric power easily accessible and so on. Is that a problem?
Yes and no. So, I mean, if you're going out somewhere, like when we go to Tanzania, we stay with the Maasai, and we stay in the actual mud huts. It's part of the adventure, and there is no power at all. Part of getting into travel photography, and specifically the kind that's going to take you to a developing country, is being prepared. So for me, I haven't found the work of having extra batteries charged any different from having my extra Canon batteries charged, which they might last longer, but I'm also a very forgetful person. So either I'm going to charge 2 or 4 or 6, but I'm going to charge or I'm going to forget. And so as long as I'm being prepared, I don't find the difference between the number of batteries to be a big deal. Canon does have I don't know, the word blanked on me, but the battery clicks into the bottom and takes 2. So there's that, of course. And yeah, and the Sony does something that my Canon doesn't do, which is it can charge off my laptop. And actually, I can boost it just with the electronic battery pack in the USB cord in, really dire situations where I'm running out. I've just plugged it into my little travel battery pack and given it a boost that way. So at least it can plug into a lot of different things where my Canon, I need my wall mount. It's got to have, a specific setup to happen. Sony, I found much more flexible, even if it does take a few more batteries. For me, the live viewfinder is worth it. That kind of changed my life. The electronic viewfinder, when you look in, and it's not the optical like what your natural eye sees, but it's actually like a small LCD screen within. I can see in bright sunlight. I can see my exposure live. While I'm changing it, it can brighten or darken as I change my settings, and that's just huge for me. I can see what I'm doing so much faster when you add in functions like zipper stripes for the highlights. The manual focus peaking. I can see all of that before I even take my photo. My photo is done, and it's perfect by my standards. Whereas the Canon is so much more trial and error. So I don't know. The Sony eats more batteries, but I'm taking less shots because I'm getting them right. and the Canon, maybe they last longer, but I was taking so many and chimping and checking my exposures, because when you're in these places, you might never go back. You can't take it for granted, and you want to get the shot, as correct as you can. So it depends how you look at it, which is why I said yes and no.
Looking at your pictures, and we will soon show our viewers a few of some of your great pictures. I noticed that you take a lot of people photos. Do you have a favorite lens for that, or in general, what are your favorite lenses?
For travel, my 24-70 is my workhorse. And I think portraits at 70 and about f4 are just brilliant. But I find that just the most versatile lens, because I might be taking a portrait but turn around and see, a street scene and need a much wider angle or whatever. Over the last few years, the 70 to 200, I've realized, especially at 200, is beautiful. This one in India was a 24-70. So taking a portrait of one of those women, I might zoom in, but when you have, 7 sisters and a brother pose for you, you want to get them all in the frame. So that's why I say that the 24-70 really is my workhorse. I really love depth of field, though, so around 70 millimeters. I have a 100 millimeter macro, but to be honest, I don't have it all much because I like the versatility more. The 70 to 200 at 200. And with my Sony a6000, I have a 35 1.8, which I find beautiful for both street scenes and for tight portraits.
Yeah, going through your photos, maybe we can do a little slideshow, and you can
Sure.
talk about where were these pictures taken, and well, this one is quite obvious.
I think it's a little obvious.
It's a little obvious. Everybody will recognize the Taj Mahal, but maybe you can tell us a bit about your destinations, your favorite destinations, and
Sure.
and for instance, in this case, how do you set up a shoot like this? I mean, okay, going to the Taj Mahal would be fairly easy, I guess. I've never been there, but it's a popular tourist destination. But then you find 8 locals and you line them up to take a portrait. How did this happen?
This is one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken, honestly. This is one of those travel, people hate this, but it's a little serendipitous. I didn't plan this photo. I didn't, hire these people. This happened at dawn. So we did sunrise at Angkor Wat twice. This was on a giving lens trip. We like to do some of these really iconic spots, at least at 2 times a day, if not over 2 days. So this was the second sunrise, I believe. And you can see the really soft light on the Taj, and also the distinct lack of crowds. A lot of people do come for sunrise, but far, far less than in the middle of the day. So I didn't do any clone stamping. It's just enough people that you can't see anyone behind them, really. As for these 8, they were walking by. I'm not joking. And I asked we had a tour guide. And I asked my tour guide if they'd be willing to stand for a photo. And they said yes, which, speaking of favorite places to photograph, India is just one of the most photogenic and photographic places I've ever been. So many people said yes. I'm not sure if it has to do with the Hindi religion, which really puts an emphasis on doing acts for where you don't get anything in return, like feeding the birds. I'm not sure if they view allowing a photographer as a selfless act. Sure felt like one. And then, of course, the colors, and I mean, you see these 7 women, and none of them are wearing the same, even close to the same outfit, and that's just all of India. So the colors and the textures just are endless. And we found people very, very friendly, very, very approachable, and that opened a lot of photographic doors. Why 8 people all agreed to stand for a photo? It's beyond me, but I am forever grateful that they did, because this is one of my favorite pictures.
So in short, you just had to ask.
You just have to ask. This is a huge thing on the giving lens, and anytime I do travel or I talk to people about travel, is how do I ask people for a portrait? And I have many more that are certainly more intimate and therefore potentially uncomfortable than this, which I'm you know, I don't have the specs in front of me, but it's taken a little wide. Like this one in Tanzania, it's close. You obviously have his attention. You had to ask to get this. And that's the bottom line, is just ask. You just have to. If you don't ask, the answer is going to be no. Or you're taking, you know, a more candid shot, which definitely sometimes can work. Some of my favorite images are candid. But for me, this connection, this eyes to the lens, is huge. This was on a 70 to 200 at 200, I believe. This was really when I was discovering that lens for portraits. And those are his cattle behind him. The other thing about just asking is being willing to be silly and vulnerable and interact with people. You know, they're not scary. People everywhere that I go are genuinely good for the most part. Like, you know, the only time I seem to get upset is when it's tourists taking advantage of a place or giving us a bad rap. But in terms of locals, people are good. They have good hearts, and if you can interact with them, you can get a facial expression like this one. You know, he gave me actually a very serious look at first, which a lot of people tend to do. That's the reaction. They don't quite know what's going on. There's a camera. You've asked, who are you? What are you going to do with this photo? What's happening? There's a language barrier. Like, I don't speak Maasai or Swahili. But if you can interact, and for me, I showed him the photo that I'd just taken, and then this was his reaction, and I took another photo. And he smiled because he had just seen a picture of himself that maybe he doesn't get to see every day. Showing the picture is paramount to taking photos of people. So I'd say first you have to ask, and you have to be willing to be silly and be vulnerable about it. And then second, show them the photo. One, it can open up an even better picture because you can break down that wall. But two, they deserve it. It's just respectful to show people images of themselves. You're kind of saying, look, you're beautiful. Look, you're worthwhile. Look, you caught my attention, and I'm happy about this photo, and you should be happy about this photo. And, you know, old women blush, old men blush. Everyone has a great time. Kids go crazy for it, of course. I do try to look for a parent when photographing children. But other than that, it's ask and show. It's just ask and show. And some people say no, and that's completely fine. Some people say no. And that's life. In fact, the more you get rejected, the thicker skin you're going to have about it. And when someone says yes, it's like yes. And it's just the greatest gift, in my opinion. And if someone says no, they say no. I'd rather have a picture like this where someone said yes, and I feel so good about this photo, and it brings back such great memories, than try to sneak pictures of people that, you know, I sense maybe don't actually want their photo taken, or feel bad, or they catch you and they scold you and you want to keep the photo anyway because they're beautiful or they're culturally dressed or whatever. Those photos don't sit with me well. They don't. That doesn't feel good when I know that I, you know, accidentally upset someone when I didn't mean to. And keeping the photo, like, no. Let's ask, get that interaction, go a step further, try to learn their name. You know, I'm sometimes on my phone, I hit record and I ask them to say their name, or type it in. I mean, you know, they've seen smartphones. They look rural, but they're not. It's not the ends of the earth here. This is just a few kilometers from a small town. And take that step further. That's more of a journalistic approach, but in the long run, I think that's really makes the whole process so much more special.
I'll have to use your approach, because I do shoot people when I'm traveling and even locally, and I learned that it's not that a big deal to ask. I used to be shy, and I used to fear rejection, but I've learned to overcome that and to go to people and ask. But it never occurred to me to somehow stimulate their reaction by showing a picture I've just taken and then taking another one. I would sometimes show up the picture that I've taken, but it never occurred to me to then ask for another one.
Yeah. And no, it works more times than you'd think to say, you know, kind of humbly, like, one more, just one more, you know. And that's what I mean about being silly about it and appreciating that you are the tourist, you are the outsider. You look foolish to them walking around their town with a camera. But if you get that reaction and go for one more, then it can just have a more human feel to it than that really stunned, wide-eyed, what's happening face. I don't get that all the time, but definitely when I do, I try to break it down, because people photos really are my heart. Portraiture is my heart. I think the best stories are people-driven stories for me.
But I see you also take great landscape photos like this.
Well, I'm trying.
Iconic African sky
Yes.
at sunset with the.
This is sunrise, actually, and it's on
Sunrise,
Serengeti, and we were on a hunt for an acacia tree. And as you can see, we barely made it because the sun was rising so quickly. Now this is almost straight out of the camera. It's just drastically underexposed. The sky certainly was orange. It wasn't that fiery red that came out in the underexposure, but I love it. This is the background on my phone. Another one of my really favorite photos. Classic rule of thirds. The 70, the 200 again. And just making sure that sun isn't, oddly underexposed, but not completely bright. That's all I was going for.
Yeah, I have a similar photo taken in a totally different context, where the sun is setting behind the steeple of a church.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've lined it up with the bells that you can see through the steeple, and by underexposing, you get the dark red. And you need a long lens. I was shooting with a 200 millimeter myself, and you get the sun about that size, so you can totally.
It's wonderful, yeah.
You get a great
the
effect.
zoom helps. You don't want the sun to get lost in the sea.
And people would ask me, did you do a lot of work? Was it photoshopped?
Right.
Did the sky really look like that? And I said, yes. If you underexpose, the sky looks like that. You don't have to do much.
Definitely. I'm not nearly as good with the moon as I am with the sun.
I'm an expert moon shooter. I can give you some tips if you want.
That'd be great, because I just can't do it. I'm Machu Picchu, of course. So this was actually sunrise set. Where's the sun in this? It is rising.
I don't know. I've never been to Machu Picchu, so I don't know what the orientation of the place.
Yeah, I forget. Honestly, I've turned myself around, but it is the dramatic clouds in the sky and just waiting for that moment that the light kind of breaks. I love that it's going behind that horn. Huayna Picchu is the mountain behind Machu Picchu, so I love just that it's streaming on it and behind it. Again, no clone stamping. I don't really do that. I think it must be sunset because we just waited longer than everyone else, so that no one.
Or you came there earlier than everyone else.
Or earlier? No, there's no earlier for Machu Picchu. There's about 1,000 people gunning at the gate when they open it at 5 a.m. It was actually a madhouse. But I know for sunset that we had a security guard yelling at us to leave. But that's just part of the giving lens. We really try to work these around photographers' needs and not just the tourist needs. So we had our guide once again trying to satiate, to calm the tour guide down while we got this last really dramatic light on an empty.
Yeah, I think we've seen hundreds of thousands of pictures of Machu Picchu, and this one stands out for me because of the light. You don't see that light often in pictures.
I did purposefully exaggerate those light flares. I liked them. Mm-hmm. Not over the top, but just drawing the eye right down to the city. This is a single shot. It was raw, but it's not an HDR, and I just darkened the skies a bit to bring out the clouds and brought down the highlights just to saturate those greens. But and you know what? I think I did touch up the very end of the beam of light. I lightened up the mountainside there just to exaggerate that beam. But not much.
And I like those dark shadows.
Yes.
Sometimes people would do HDR or open up the shadows in post. Totally destroy the image because it will look very flat. There will be no contrast. Well, there will be a lot of HDR will typically give a lot of local contrast to images. You get great textures and so on, but it looks totally unnatural because the shadow is gone, and the shadow is supposed to be there, and it helps
this case, yeah.
3D feeling to the picture, then you can see that the
When I really wanted just it to feel dramatic, and to me, I just wanted all eyes to go straight to the horn and the city, and not get lost in everything else. I just think it gives the sense of Machu really erupting, because really the whole landscape is phenomenal. Every angle you look at, there's peaks and valleys of just staggering size. But I wanted to look like Machu was, I don't know, the tallest or the most prominent of them all. And actually, I'm surprised. I don't normally put my subject in the center, but I think the light on it and the kind of swoop of the tears, just all led to the middle. For some reason, this came out as the strongest composition for me, rather than something more classically rule of thirds or wider.
I think that definitely works.
Thank you. Again, one of my favorites. I took about 1,000 shots. That was the only one that got the light flares that I really liked. This one's from Morocco.
Morocco, yeah. I was thinking about it and looking at the jalaba of the traditional dress of Moroccan male.
Absolutely. I've been told the white cap means they've done their pilgrimage to Mecca. This is on the Sony A6000, and it's with the 35 1.8 lens, I think. I really loved it. So this is a good example of when I love that he's not looking, even though I do a lot of really strong eye contact portraits head on. I love that he wasn't looking at me. I love that he was oblivious to me. Part of that was that I had the A6000. The Canon got me noticed everywhere. I couldn't get away with anything in Morocco with the Canon. A lot of finger wags.
Yep, I've been to Morocco. I've been to Morocco twice, and it's unlike India. I mean, you said that in India, people will be very open to being photographed, and in my experience in Morocco, it's exactly the opposite.
Actually, I found it extremely hard, and maybe especially as a woman, I'm not sure, but I stuck out like a sore thumb, and with all the Canon gear, people just were not into it. Even if they just thought they were in the scene, like trying to get a street scene with no one particular person was difficult, because people thought they were in it and they would shout. And don't get me wrong, I had a wonderful time in Morocco, and I actually met really wonderful people. We lived in Marrakesh for a month. The Sony is what opened up those doors, because it was small, because it has the flip screen. So I could hold it at waist level because it's quiet, because the lenses were smaller. That I was able to get this shot, one of my favorites from my time in Morocco. He looks like he's almost lit up by a flash, but he's not. He's just in a brighter stream of light than his books. And I love the blue of the books. I love the orange of the wall. And I got about 3 shots, and he looked up, and that changed everything for me. You know, him looking at the camera was just not the same picture that I wanted.
But was he aware that you were taking his picture?
No. So this was completely candid.
Yeah.
And I don't do it often, but when I do it, I love it. Oh, this one looks small, but that's from India. I am a sucker for silhouettes.
I'll just go through a few of those images quite a bit more quickly, since we are a bit running along on time, but it's such a fascinating subjects in conversation that I would...
You're in Europe. Can you guess where this is?
It looks like Europe. I cannot really...
That's okay. It's Lisbon, Portugal.
Lisbon, yeah, Portugal.
Yeah, just something about the positioning of Lisbon. The sun goes down, right there. The quality of the light at the end of every day was just phenomenal. So simple scene, some leading lines with the poles, but it's just about that light on the laundry and the pink wall that does it for me.
Yeah, it looks like one of those streets that come down from the hills to the side of the city center, down to the Rossio place, or what's the other square called? I don't remember.
I forget now, but
Fama, or the other neighborhood on the other side. It's been how many? More maybe 15 years I've been in
You should
Lisbon.
go back. That was one of my favorite cities. I said we did 6 months all around Europe, and Lisbon took us completely by surprise in culture, but for me in photos as well. I was just,
Yeah, it's a
if I was ever going to move away, I'm moving to Lisbon.
photogenic city too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to guess it's from Africa again.
Yes, same tribe. I've been fortunate to go to this one Maasai tribe 3 times, which is just really unfair in the grand scheme of things. No one should get such wonderful opportunity. I think this was the photo where I discovered portraits at 200 millimeters and blowing out the background into that soft yellow and soft green, and just his face, and he held up his machete, and he's right at that age in the Maasai where boys are becoming men, being considered into the warriorhood. And so to me, this really just captured that transition. Kind of, he looks like a child, but you can tell he's also exiting childhood at the same time. And I don't know, he just pops out of the back, and the Maasai blankets, they never fail to add a wonderful texture to a scene.
Yeah. This is Morocco again?
It is, and this is another Sony. Just an example of the street scenes I was able to get with that Sony. So he's just sleeping. Like, that this photo could imply a lot. I don't know, people have said homeless or an addict or whatever. I think he's just resting, as Moroccan men are known to do. And I loved the simple textures behind him. I loved the 5 boxes. I don't know what they were for, but that pattern of the 5 boxes. And I love his red Coke can and his blue garb that all the Moroccan men wear over their clothes. That classic Moroccan pointy hood. But his was blue and not brown and striped as most people had. And he's taking a rest. And this was at waist level. That flip screen again on the Sony A6000. And I don't know if this was the kit lens or the 35, to be honest, but
yeah,
the blue and the orange. Oh, India.
India, yeah.
All you gotta do is step out the door in the morning, and that's it. Your job is done. I did show him the photo after. I didn't want him to notice me though, and I loved just the Coca-Cola and the pink wrap around his head. As a travel photographer, the fact that he's reading, you can see the Hindi writing on his newspaper, a big headline, really places you know where you are almost immediately. If not India, you're thinking somewhere in this region. And I love that his shawl that he's wearing is pink and not red, so he's not lost into the Coca-Cola. Yep. Red part, and the Coca-Cola, like, that's just hilarious to me that some of those things that are everywhere you go around the world, Coca-Cola is one of them, and it's a love-hate thing. I just thought it added an extra element to the shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Maasai, yes. As a place I've spent a lot of time, a lot of my favorite photos are from here. I love this one. It's a good example of shooting into the light, which I don't normally do. I really like to have my subjects well lit, I think. But again, that flare and the quality of the light, that's because all the cows, or they don't have cows, all the goats and or maybe it is cows, are coming in, cattle, kicking up dust at any rate. And that's what gives the wonderful hazy quality for the end of the day there in the Maasai village. And this is George. I spent a lot of time with George. He was great. He spoke good English, and I don't know. This just gives such an ethereal feeling that it really shows kind of how I feel about the Maasai. This is what it felt like to be there. This hazy, surreal quality to the whole experience.
And this also is very recognizable.
Yes, obviously this is Paris.
It's the Louvre pyramid, isn't it?
Las Vegas is going really extreme with the accurate nature. No, yes, it's Egypt, and actually I went at a time where I was really told not to go, and whether or not that was a good idea, I don't know. Don't ask my parents, but no one was there. Like, look at it. No one is there. That was just the funniest, craziest, greatest thing to me to go to the pyramids, and there's no tourists there. There were some. Mostly they appeared to be maybe from Abu Dhabi or the UAE, just more affluent kind of Muslim families I saw, but not a lot of European or North American. And we felt perfectly safe the entire time we were there. I was with Paul Pachugan, photographer from Australia, and Meredith Dolan, photographer from Philadelphia. And we were going to Jordan for a giving lens, but we wanted to stop. We spent 3 days in Cairo, and like I said, there's nobody there, which made for wonderful photos. When we hired a guide, we asked him to dress culturally, if he wouldn't mind, and to bring a camel, not to ride, but just to pose. And got this. And again, that's, you know, kind of the opposite of the Taj Mahal. We really did have this photo in mind when we hired a guide, and when we chose who we were going to hire. Part of that was, you know, we're photographers. We don't actually care about riding the camel. We just want the camel to sit in front of the pyramids. And there you go. So once again, you kind of got to ask for what you want in some occasions, and then be ready for those spontaneous, wonderful moments that are part of why we travel in the first place.
Yeah, it's a bit sad that those countries, like in particular Egypt, which is still relatively safe, but because of all the turmoil, that everything that's been going on, I think that they lost a huge number of tourists, and
they've gone from, I think, 15 million down to 5 million,
and it's really hitting their economy, I guess.
Hurting the economy so bad. So when we went, we stayed in, you know, a local hotel. We hired all local guides. We hired a local taxi driver. Of course, you know, we just wanted to spend as much money as we could, which wasn't very much because it's Egypt. But put it into the economy, and, you know, people actually were saying to us, we're so happy you're here. Like, we love Egypt. There's no more tourists. Like, thank you for coming to our country, which is obviously a very humbling thing to hear as the traveler. And everyone wanted to have us for tea. Everyone wanted to bring us, you know, to their home, to meet their families. It was just a very moving, welcoming atmosphere, I think, especially because of the lack of tourism. And we had read that maybe that was a problem. People were getting desperate and therefore pushy, but we didn't experience that at all. We weren't accosted or heckled on every corner, you know, in terms of buying products or tours. People were actually still extremely respectful, even though they are probably quite desperate for more tourists.
And I guess this is Jordan?
It is Jordan. You can tell from the head wrap mostly. This was a man sitting inside of Petra. Yeah. And once again, you just got to ask. I don't know, he couldn't get that other eye open, but that is just part of his personality. I loved his white beard and the characteristics of his face. And so I asked, you know, you can see the catchlight in his eye. I tried to, people will follow you a little bit, like after you've asked, you can move around and they'll naturally follow the lens. So you can do a bit of placing that way. And he was sitting there playing music. So I did give him a little bit of pocket change when I was done, which, you know, I'm not all for. I'm certainly not a fan of paying for photos, but when someone is patient with you and if they're there selling food, you know, I've bought mangoes, I've bought scarves. I have so many scarves. It's a wonderful byproduct of taking portraits. Just to, you know, be respectful of people's time, and really he played lovely music, so I was happy to give just a few coins, you know, as part of that experience.
This looks somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe Burma or...
Maybe. It's in North Thailand, so almost.
Yeah, it's close.
Rural Thailand. And she was just crossing the fields on her way from one place to another. And once again, I had my guide ask her to pause. This was a giving lens moment. So she actually had a number of photographers taking her portrait. She was kind enough to stop and wait, and we showed her all of them, and it was this really wonderful moment, although I'm sure she was crossing the field going, oh dear, there's a lot of cameras on me right now. You do have to be careful not to scare people or take advantage of people or make them uncomfortable. We tread really, really lightly in my personal life and on the giving lens as well.
I like your portraits where you are really coming in close to your subject and using a long lens to blur the background. There's still, I mean, like the previous one, it's still, I could still be able to make out that it was from Jordan because I know the traditional head garb that they wear.
Right.
But it would be hard otherwise to figure out where this guy was. But I like even more when you give a bit of context around the.
I think these were soy fields, very recognizable to Asia for sure. The fact that she happened to be wearing blue just makes her really explode out of the hill behind her. So if she'd been wearing brown or red or green, it might have not had the same pow. The fact that she's the only person in the frame and she's wearing blue in a sea of green is huge. The stick she was just walking with, so that was just a bonus. Gave her hands something to do. All around, this was just a standout moment for everyone on the trip, and hopefully she had a good laugh too. She seemed pretty pleased with all of the beautiful pictures when it was over.
All right, this is more of a
adventure, fun. This was an abandoned shipwreck my husband and I found. I'm somewhere on the coast of Portugal. We went by camper van, so we had the freedom to just pull up and park for the night. I can't remember the name of this town. I noticed the shipwreck on Google Maps actually, and so that's why we drove out there and just did some spinning. My husband wanted something to do in the photo, so I gave him some steel wool, and it's cool. It's sunset. The rocks are all lit up orange. You know, we tried a couple different angles, but this I just thought you get a little bit of context about what the heck is happening in this photo.
Ireland, Giant's Causeway.
My husband again. He does an outstanding superhero stance.
And this must have been late afternoon, actually, looking at the direction of the light. I'm surprised that there is nobody there. When I was there was like 1 million people.
Well, a few things is that we went in February. I went for this is where we ended our 6-month trip. And also my heritage is obviously Irish, Siobhan Mulligan. And so we finished in Ireland in February. And so there were fewer, but there was still a lot of people. This took a lot of patience, which is another tenet of travel photography. Got to have the patience to wait for everyone to get, off of here. Funnily enough, people were getting up there and taking selfies facing the ocean. We couldn't figure that out. Because then that could be anywhere, just us in the ocean. And they were actually, anyway, side story. It also doesn't hurt that my husband's favorite piece of clothing is a bright red hoodie. So that certainly helps him pop out from on top of there. And he can hold very still. He's a really fantastic assistant. I love having him around when I'm working.
I'm just going through, in the interest of time, a few of yours, and just because I'm trying to guess where they were taken. And this is India again?
It is India. Jodhpur? It is Jodhpur, exactly. The blue city. I found this so interesting that he painted just literally the borders of his house blue on a street that otherwise was not blue at all. And he was just sitting in the doorway and, ask or you don't receive. Classic.
Yeah.
This is my friend Jackson, who I've been able to take a portrait of several years now.
And I guess one of those guys was in a Steve McCurry shot one day. I remember one of his photos. He had an orange turban with a beard and mustache.
Right. Absolutely. Well,
might have been one of those.
There is an abundance of them, that's for sure. This is India, but this is at the Pushkar Camel Fair, which is a famous camel fair in the country. And again, this was bright and early in the morning lights, before there's crowds, before people get cranky.
And I will just, because we could go over these.
I know, don't worry.
All day long, but we have to. And And people can go to your website. We will give
Of
them
course.
directions to where can they read about all your adventures and see your photos. And
Yeah.
this is much closer to us, Ireland again. So typical Irish.
Classic, the red and the white. I just couldn't believe this scene even existed. And this is another Sony A6000 shot. I think it was just the kit lens. And that live viewfinder really helped me nail the whites because that was hard. You don't want them gray, you don't want them blue, you don't want them blown out. So I was using that to really get it perfect. I think I took 3 shots and was like, yep, that's exactly what I was looking for, which is, again, the reason I'm so attracted to the A6000 and now the A7R.
All right. That was a great
Thank you for doing that. That was great. It's always fun to
that was a great
visit.
tour of the world in a dozen pictures. Not in 80 days.
Almost all the way around.
Yeah, anyway, so where can people go and find more about you and your photos?
Yeah, KateSiobhanphotography.com is my website. I know Siobhan's hard to spell, but it's down here.
Yeah, we will put a link in the blog post when we publish this.
And I'm Kate Siobhan Mulligan on everything, across all social media, Instagram, all of that.
I guess there aren't many other Kate Siobhan Mulligans in the world.
There's not. Well, yeah, you'd be surprised, but not that are doing what I'm doing at any rate. So yeah, I'm out there. I'm on it all.
And thegivinglens.com is the other really important thing that you are involved with.
Again, links through my website as well. I'm also very easy to find. It's no one really doing what we're doing there either. Yeah.
So I would like to thank you for this conversation and showing us your photos and talking to us about the Giving Lens. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we say goodbye?
No, just thanks so much for having me. It's such a good show.
It's been a pleasure. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
You too. Have a nice evening.